my name is Kelly. For the first video, I showed you the basics of pinch pot. I'm going to show you now how to use that same technique, but we're going to do our very first intentional shape, and this one is going to be a cup. So first, removing a block of clay from my chunk, turning it into a nice ball that's smooth and even as possible. And then this is just a repeat of the last video, holding it in my left hand, pushing down into the middle with my right thumb, and then starting to make that same sweeping motion out, trying to keep the top circumference about the same as it is now. To make a cup, usually you want to focus on getting more height than you would normally feel is naturally easy to do. I'm going to focus on using these 4 fingers here to really press into the wall while I'm sweeping the clay open at the bottom so that the bottom doesn't get too wide. So once I've expanded the bottom and I have a nice thick rim here, so I'm hooking with the tip of my thumb and drawing it up like this. And I might find that after I come up a little bit, I want to feel down a little bit lower to the corner, maybe get some more clay to come up. And the whole time I'm using my fingertips to feel the thickness. So remembering that your fingertips are a tool to move the clay, and in addition to that, they're a tool to give you the information you need to know how much pressure to put into your fingertips. Okay, so usually if I'm making a cup, I'm not really worried about this right now because this is something I'll fix when it's leather hard. I'm mostly concerned with the wall thickness being even. So at this point, if I do feel like there's a thin spot somewhere, I might see if there's a thicker part nearby and sweep some of the extra clay into that thin spot. In order for it to stand, hit it down a couple times to make a little bit of a flat bottom. Now this piece here has its thickest area down here at the bottom, and then its thinnest area up towards the top. Now, something that I didn't mention in the last video, which I'll mention now, is that when the clay is in this prime state of flexibility, it's called plastic. And when the clay is in its plastic state, it's the most malleable. You can move it without it breaking. So that's the stage in which you want to make sure that the piece is the shape you want. So if it's kind of oblong and you want it more cylindrical, you have to make sure that you fix that. And that when you do leave it to start hardening, you're not leaving it in a position that's not what you desire for the final shape. Later on, when this is leather hard, it'll probably be tomorrow, I'll come back to this and shave it down. So I'll be refining the shape here, refining the shape here. And then I just want to make sure that if I'm not able to keep a close eye on it, to make sure it doesn't get too dry, I'll cover it with a piece of plastic. And then when this is no longer flexible, like if you poke it, it doesn't move, it stays in one place, then I'll know that I'm ready to do the part 2 of this cup making using the pinch pot method. So this is the cup that was began yesterday, and it's now at its leather hard stage. So the other day it was plastic when I made the shape, and now it's leather hard. I let it sit covered with plastic for about 12 hours, and now it's firm enough that I can work with it in the ways that I would consider to be leather hard working techniques. So I'm going to start off by trimming down the top using this knife. And I'm going to use my thumb and the blade of the knife in a similar way that I would if I was peeling an apple. And it can be pretty easy to think you're making a straight line when you're not. So I try to whittle down just a little bit at a time. Try not to go too far. Once you get that first jagged edge off of the rim, it's a little bit easier to see how uneven it is. Okay, so that's good enough for now. I'll probably do a little bit more trimming on that shortly. The next thing I'm going to do is shave off the exterior. I like to use this tool. It's called a Sureform. This is a tool that you would find in a hardware store in the plaster working tool section. It is a plaster working tool, but it's really popular among ceramicists for planing a surface. If you try to use the Sureform on the clay when it's still plastic or when it's just a little too wet, it won't work as well. Also, if you try to use it when the clay is too dry, it also won't work as well. I think this is a pretty good stage. If you see the ribbons of clay coming out in these long ribbons, and they're not chipping out kind of like little pieces of sawdust, and if they're not getting stuck and not falling out easily, then it means you're probably in the perfect stage of dryness. For this cup, I want it to be thin enough that when I pick it up, it doesn't feel like there's any excess weight. So that would mean spending quite a bit of time trimming this down. Now, when I feel the sides of this, the walls, I notice that there's a bit more clay down here in the corner than there is throughout the rest of the wall. So I'm going to spend some time going horizontally around this bottom part. So the base of the cup, the amount of clay that I have down here is a little bit thicker than the walls, and I like the fact that I can use that thickness to round out the bottom shape. If I didn't have a little bit of extra clay in the platform that the walls are sitting on, I would be limited with what I can do in this corner. Okay. So I'll say that that's good enough for now, and go on to show you the next part. So this part is really fun. Before I trim down the inside of the lip, I'm going to plane the rim and also plane the bottom here using this trick. You need a wooden surface, something with a bit of a wood grain. So if it's plywood, that's great. If it's particle board, that would even work as long as it's not too abrasive. And you need a spray bottle. Spray a little bit of water so you have a little puddle. And then you take the object that you're wanting to make a nice, smooth, rounded surface, and you press down and move it around in a circle. And then it's really flat. So I'm going to take a sponge and just lightly wipe off the excess moisture that's on there. And now I'm going to trim down the inside of the lip. Going back to this knife, and with a similar peeling motion of my dominant hand, instead of peeling across the top, I'm peeling on the inside of the rim. And this is a pretty sensitive motion because you can mess up the rim if you are not paying attention. So you want to go slow and steady, a little bit at a time. You might do 2 or 3 passes all the way around until you get it to be as thin as you want it to be. And remember, this is just a pinch pot. But that being said, you still can make really nice looking things with this technique. So, I could whittle that down a little bit more, but I kind of like it just like that. I think that my next step is actually going to be to whittle down the outside corner just a little bit so that it's slightly curved, so that it kind of mimics the shape that I have here at the foot. So I'm using that same kind of peeling motion with the knife, and I'm just going really light along that corner, not taking off too much. Okay, so I'm going to leave this alone for a moment and now go to the bottom here. I think that the shape I have here is suitable, but I need it to be just a little bit thinned out. It's a little heavy. So I'm going to use the Sureform again to trim it down, just to get rid of the extra clay. And then use this technique again for the bottom. I'm going to go take a look at the rim again, and I think what I'd like to do is keep whittling this down bit by bit until I have a nice rounded shape that moves up the wall and into the inside corner of the lip. So the overall shape of this, I think, is exactly as I want it to be, but because I was using such a large, sharp blade, I have these really subtle transitions from each mark. In order to get rid of those, I'm going to go over the whole rounded rim with this tool. This is the metal rib. So to hold this, I've got 4 fingers spread out close to the curved edge, and my thumb placed in the center, back towards the straight edge. And then I can bend it like that. And I'm just going to lightly scrape all the way around here. When you do this, it will kind of scuff up the clay, and you'll have some kind of crumb-like texture sitting on the surface, and that's normal. It's totally fine. You'll be able to get rid of that after you're finished. I'm just going to lightly pick up that crummy texture with a damp sponge, and it's best not to overdo it with the sponge. You don't want to wash away the finer particles that are in that clay body, leaving a grittier, sandier texture on the surface. So just really light there. Now the final thing I wanted to address was the smoothness on the inside. If you want this to be a functional cup and you want it to be easy to wash, easy to use, for now I'm just going to take my damp sponge and give it a little run across the surface, moving from the bottom and up. And actually, when I was making this initially, I was making sure to use my thumb to really blend and smooth. When you're learning the technique, sometimes that doesn't come as naturally, but as you get better at it and you start to notice how much of a difference it makes during this phase, not to have a very uneven surface, I'm going to leave this texture of the Sureform as it is. I could show you how to smooth it out, but I think I'll save that for another video. So that's the cup. I hope it was fun for you to watch this. Maybe you should try it sometime if you have clay available to you. Feel free to check out the other videos that are going to be part of this Pinch Paw series if you liked this one. Thank you so much. Be well.